do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So it's about time we talk about the Lakers. This is obviously the championship favorite. They won it last year. They've been favored to repeat pretty much all season. Felt like they only got better in the offseason, so it's like, okay, well, this team is going to certainly be very, very good. As long as they can stay healthy, they're going to be fine. They have lost 4 in a row now. And obviously a lot of that is very much due to Anthony Davis's injury, as well as Dennis Schroder being out due to health and safety stuff. So they've lost 4 in a row. 5 out of their last 6 have been losses here. So I kind of just wanted to go over the Lakers, what we've seen out of them, the potential weaknesses for this team, and what this means for them in the long run. I think the first thing everybody needs to realize is chill out, right? And I feel like this is, most rational people are not freaking out about the Lakers right now. This happens, especially with a guy as good as Anthony Davis not being available. It's going to be at first an adjustment period without him, and obviously the team is not going to be as good. They're not a title. They're not a championship team without Anthony Davis. Let's just be real here. Even as good as LeBron James is and has been, this team is not going to win the title if Anthony Davis is not healthy. It's just not going to happen. So him being out and them losing, while not, it's never ideal to lose to like the Wizards and get blown out by 30 by the Jazz, lose to the Heat who have been struggling, the Brooklyn Nets and Denver Nuggets. It's not like they're losing to horrible teams other than Washington, who has been putting it together recently but doesn't have a great record. That loss is not great. Similar, I guess the Heat you could also say that for, haven't been super good lately, or they've been putting it together lately but haven't been great all season. So these losses are, not the worst when you're looking at them on paper, but the way that the Lakers have lost has been kind of concerning because a couple of these have been blowouts. The Nets game, while it was only like a 10-point loss, wasn't particularly close the whole way. It was kind of like, it was close for a little bit, and then the Nets kind of pulled away in the second half. The Jazz one was from the jump, it was a pretty big, okay, this team is getting blown out. I mean, the Jazz have been absolutely on fire. They've been hitting all of their three-pointers and just basically destroying everybody. So the Lakers being on the road there without, 2 of their better players is you can excuse all this stuff, right? And a lot of people are going to excuse it for the Lakers and say, hey, it's fine. They're just, cruising basically. This team is not very good without Anthony Davis, and they're going to be fine as long as they're healthy by the time the playoffs come around. And for the most part, I agree, but I do think there are a couple of weaknesses here that we can take a look at and maybe point to and say, okay, this is how you would be able to beat the Lakers in a playoff series. I think the first thing you can look at is the lack of a secondary playmaker with Schroder being gone. Him being out, hopefully he'll be back on Friday for them. It looks like he's going to be, making his return soon. He's been out for a while with health and safety stuff. But him not being there is a big blow to not having that secondary playmaker next to LeBron. LeBron has always been at his best in his career when he has another guy who can kind of create with the ball in his hands and, distribute to others and kind of take a lot of the load off of LeBron. And Schroder has been that for this Lakers team, not necessarily like in terms of scoring like Anthony Davis is, but in terms of distributing, playmaking, passing, all that stuff, that good point guard stuff. That's kind of been Schroder's role here, being that secondary guy. And LeBron has had that in the past with guys like Kyrie Irving and Dwayne Wade. Those guys are kind of more score-first guards, but kind of just taking some of the load away from LeBron and being able to, free him up a little bit. Schroder has been that for the Lakers, just considering how good he's been, shooting the ball and distributing and all that stuff. So that is a thing there where teams can kind of just lock in on LeBron, especially with, them lacking that secondary scoring option in Anthony Davis, who, as we know, is one of the 6 or 7 best players in the world, and is incredible scoring the ball. He can shoot from anywhere. He has that crazy mid-range shot. He can get to the rim. We know all the Anthony Davis stuff, right? Obviously, it's a big blow not having him there. So losing these 2 guys who are clearly threats the other team has to keep in check means that you can lock up a lot of this defensive attention on LeBron James, and that means that you have to rely on other role players to step up. And the Lakers, while they have a lot of good complementary options, don't have a lot of guys who can put the ball in the basket themselves. Like if you're thinking of Marc Gasol, being however old he is, like 35, 36, is kind of past that stage of his career. He's become a lot more of a distributor these days. Wesley Matthews has been inconsistent. You have like Montrezl Harrell, who is not a great isolation player. But, he can do some things, but he's a little bit one-dimensional in some aspects of his game. Like and like Kyle Kuzma, who has also been good this season, but is not a great off-the-dribble ISO creator. So you kind of see my point here, where the Lakers don't have a lot of guys who can really do things on their own if you're missing Davis and Schroder here. And so, obviously, like, this is not a newsflash to anybody. Missing Anthony Davis, who is probably a top 6-7 player in the entire world, maybe even higher than that depending on who you are, that's obviously not going to be a good thing for your team. And Schroder is one of the better, role players in the entire league. We saw how good he was last year with OKC, and he's had moments, previously with the Hawks and all that stuff. So Schroder's a very good player. So missing him as well is obviously not good. So that's the first thing you point to when you're looking at this skid here. And then this is something in the offseason that people kind of glossed over, and it's their change in the way that their centers play now. They swapped out Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee for Marc Gasol and Montrezl Harrell. And Howard and McGee are both like run, jump, and dunk centers, right? We know kind of that archetype of like guys who don't really stretch the floor, but they're super athletic, decent defensively, can be a good rim protector, and they basically do the pick and roll thing, roll to the rim, catch the lobs, all that good stuff. And those are, of course, valuable players in today's NBA. We saw them be, very good role players for the Lakers last season, both of them, both McGee and Howard. This year, it's a very different look at the center spot for them. Like, Marc Gasol is very much not that kind of guy. He's not like an alley-oop type center. Like, he's the one throwing the lob, not the one catching and jamming it down, Not like, super athletic in terms of bounce and all that kind of thing. He's a lot more of a distributor, playmaker through that center position. And then Montrezl Harrell is, similar. Like, he's athletic, he can throw down the lobs, but he's a little bit undersized, and is a little bit more of a guy who kind of tries to take people off the dribble and stuff. So it's a very different, look at the center rotation this year, as compared to last season. And so is that going to hurt them in the long term? I'm not sure. It is something interesting to think about, because you might consider that maybe, that run, jump, and dunk athletic type center is maybe a little bit of a better fit next to LeBron and Anthony Davis. I think you could certainly make that argument. Whereas having guys who kind of try to do too much, you could consider Gasol and Harrell kind of guys who might want to, hold the ball for a longer than they maybe should, and take too many shots or something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's all very subjective based on, who you think is better for a basketball team. But that's at least something to consider. Maybe that's part of the reason why this Lakers team is struggling right now, is just a different look at the center position, and maybe it's not the ideal fit with the way that the team works. But maybe it's just, growing pains, and they're not really turned it on yet, because as we know, Gasol is one of the smartest players. He can definitely adapt to any system, and so I think they're still kind of figuring it out with him, and LeBron can play with anybody, and so I think part of it is probably just growing pains here, but maybe that's something to consider that we kind of overlooked in the offseason, that they've changed that style, and it might not be the best fit for the way that they kind of ran things last year. I don't know, something to consider. But I mean, it is kind of unfortunate, because this was supposed to be kind of not necessarily the test for the Lakers, because this team doesn't need to be tested. They're coming off a title, so obviously they're proven. But this stretch of games they've had, and the ones that are upcoming, like in this little stretch here, we know they just played Denver, Brooklyn, Miami, and Utah. Their next three are Portland, Golden State, and Phoenix. So those are three of the top teams in the Western Conference, and that's going to be some tough competition. And when we look back on this stretch here, like late in the season, we're saying like, oh man, the Lakers are playing the Phoenix Suns in the second round. How can we look back on their matchups and see who's going to win? Well, they're just going to point at this and say, well, they didn't have Anthony Davis, so we can't really know. And that is unfortunate. It would be exciting to see how some of these teams, we were talking about how the Jazz might match up with the Lakers in the postseason, because, the Jazz have been great this regular season, but maybe they don't quite have it in a Lakers matchup, and we could have seen them play at full strength, but obviously the Lakers missing their players here, we're not going to get to see that. And so, similarly with Portland, Golden State, Phoenix upcoming here, all three of those teams could potentially be Lakers playoff opponents, and we can just point back to this and say, well, Anthony Davis was out, so we can't really know until these matchups actually happen when both teams are playing at full strength here. So that is the unfortunate part about this, is we can't really see how teams stack up against the Lakers at full strength here, because we just really don't know. And even before this AD injury, they were kind of coasting all year. They just haven't really been, putting the pedal to the metal. Like, we saw them have 3 straight overtime games against OKC twice and Detroit. So clearly they're not, playing at max capacity right now. And I think that even still is the case. I think a lot of the team still kind of is coasting, knowing that as long as they're healthy by the time they get to the playoffs, they're going to be fine. We saw this with the Warriors during that, their KD era, where, there was a year they weren't even the 1 seed, and there was times where Steph had to miss time and KD had to miss time. And as the title favorite, you just, as long as you get into the playoffs, you're going to be okay. Especially this year with, who knows how the situation, the world situation is going to be by the time the playoffs comes around. But maybe if there's no fans in arenas, then, home court advantage might not even matter. So if the Lakers have the 4 seed, who cares, right? We'll have to see how things shake out. But it is kind of unfortunate, I think, that we're just going to look back at this run without AD here and say, well, they weren't at full strength and they were coasting, so we can't really tell anything. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation. But I really think that's how it's going to be. Like, say the Lakers are the 4 seed going into the playoffs, I really don't think anybody's going to be worried. They're already proven. And, maybe if Anthony Davis is hurt for the playoffs, then we can have a conversation, if he's not healthy by then, or if he re-injures something. But, as of right now, I just don't think there's really any reason to panic. But I think that we can maybe have a conversation about the center thing. We can maybe have a conversation about, the need for a secondary playmaker if Schroder doesn't have it, or if he's not healthy or whatever. But I don't know. I just wouldn't overblow all the concerns for this team, because they're going to be fine. And I think that's about all I got to say on the Los Angeles Lakers. So like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you think about the Lakers. Should we be panicking about them? I don't think many people really are. That's probably just a NBA Twitter thing where, it gets kind of overblown. But anyway, yeah, with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.